So percentages closely relate to fractions. And it's the idea that it's even in the wording of percent, it's like something per and cent relates to 100. So it's like out of 100 is what we're dealing with here. So what we have drawn is a block of 100 squares here, where each line is representing 10. So if we look at this first scenario of how we represent 20%, visually, it would be 20 squares out of 100 squares. So what's shaded there is 20% of the squares. In a fraction form, that would be 20 out of 100, or a 0.2. Now, converting between these different forms is important. And the idea is if you have the percentage form, then you just take that number that's showing up in the percent as the numerator, and the denominator is always 100. That's what connects with the percent. Now, a form we'll be converting between is percentage form and decimal form. So let's look at the two routes to go with that. Let's say you're given the percentage first, and you want the decimal form. So if you have 20%, imagine your decimal is hanging out right there at the end. It's like 20 with the dot at the end. To change to decimal form, you're going to move to the left 2 spots. And it's always 2 because that represents the hundreds place. So to convert that, you would then be at 0 and then your 0.2 because your decimal is now over there. So that's how you can change from percentage to decimal. You just take your percent, move the decimal to the left 2 spots. To go in the other direction, let's say we had our decimal first and we wanted to make it a percentage, then you would move that decimal 2 spots to the right. So you just go in the opposite direction. If there are any blanks, you just fill in with a 0. So our new spot would be at the end there, and that first 0 you can just ignore. But then you'd have 2, 0 in your decimal there, but that would be a percentage form. So you can convert between the two just by moving the decimal place around. All right, so let's look at these different forms and kind of looking visually as well as numerically what's coming through here. So what we're seeing here is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. So 70 of the squares out of 100 are filled in. So you could write that fraction first. But that represents 70% of the squares, which would be 0.7 if you're thinking about that 70%, but then move that decimal left 2 spots for 0.7. Here we have 3 of the 100 squares filled in, which means that's 3%. Now for converting this to a decimal, 3%, so our decimal place is right there. Oops, right there. And we're going to move to the left 2 spots. So 1, 2, which means we fill in the blank with a 0. So this is the same thing as 0.03. Now I want to emphasize this because a common mistake is to take 3% and change it to 0.3, but you want to be careful because that right there is actually 30%, not 3%. So just be careful that when you have these small numbers like this, really you don't have anything in the tens place is key. You'll have a 0 coming in your decimal form. All right. Here we're given the percentage, so 32%. So visually we'll have 10, 20, 30, and then 2. So that's 32 out of the 100 squares. And then changing that to decimal, we'll have 0.32. 40%, we'll have 10, 20, 30, 40. So we'll have 40 out of the 100 squares, which means this will be 0.4. And you could write 0.40, that's also correct. But you could just leave it as 0.4 as those are the same value. 61%, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then one extra one. So that's 61 out of the 100 squares, which makes it a 0.61. All right, down here we're given the decimal. So if you remember from our lesson on decimals, this is our hundreds place. So this is like 17 out of 100, which means this is a 17%, which we could also see by moving that decimal to the right 2 spots for 17%. So we're going to have 10, 17. 0.05, so this is 5 100ths, so we're going to have 5 out of 100, which means this is the same. Also, you can think of moving to the right 2 spots for the percentage form. That's 5%. So we're going to have 5 of these 100 squares filled in. 0.3, so with this one, if we think about moving the decimal to the right 2 spots, so that's a 30. So this is the same as 30%, or 30 out of 100. So we're going to have 10, 20, 30. So there's a visualization of our percentages, as well as switching between percent, decimal, and fraction form.